the La Crosse Public Library Archives presents Dark La Crosse Stories, a series in collaboration with the La Crosse Tribune. Dark La Crosse is a suite of programs that feature the seedier side of La Crosse history and also include a downtown walking tour, a trolley tour, and an annual stage production with new content each year.
I'm a gravedigger. Now, my official title is cemetery attendant, but I prefer gravedigger. I just like the sound of it. I've been at the Kamel Cemetery for years, and I know every hole here like the back of my hand. About 2 weeks ago, I got a call from my apprentice saying something didn't look right with one of the plots. I asked which one. He said he thought it was the second plot in row B, but he wasn't sure. So I asked, to be or not to be? It's a simple question. Well, he double-checked, and it was to be all right. When I got here, I could tell from 40 yards out that wasn't my dig. So I called George Ritter, the park superintendent, and the Kamel Cemetery supervisor. They needed to get a permit and approval from relatives, and we opened it up. Just like I had suspected, empty.
Corpse stolen from Kamel Cemetery grave was the newspaper headline that horrified La Crosse citizens on September 30, 1932. This was the first known case of a grave robbery in La Crosse, and the deceased victim was Perry Brinstad, a milk hand at a local dairy farm. According to his obituary, he had been in the charge of La Crosse County and resided at the Globe Hotel for a long period of time before his death, basically living as a pauper. The body was found 12 days later on Lower Pettibone Island, wrapped in burlap bags. The body was not completely unharmed, though. The legs had been removed from the torso. The coroner, Raymond Dwyer, and other officials determined that the many knife incisions had been committed by someone well-versed in medical science. The body was returned to the grave, and it remains a mystery to this day. Kamel Cemetery has served as the public cemetery for the town of Campbell and North La Crosse since the 1860s. In the spring of 1932, the town board voted to turn over control of the cemetery to the city of La Crosse. The La Crosse Parks Department currently manages the site. In the 1990s, a local paranormal group was recording sound in Kamel Cemetery. They claimed to have recorded a spirit, and from the scratching recording came the words,
"They've cut me up. They've cut me up."
Perhaps it was the ghost of poor Perry Brinstad, still searching for his legs. And now I'd like to welcome in Anita Taylor-Doring, Senior Archivist and the Archives Department Manager at the La Crosse Public Library, who did some of the initial research for this story.
The story of grave robbing, the first of its kind in La Crosse, was carried in newspapers all over the state, including Madison, Oshkosh, and Racine. While not a murder, this story remains an unsolved mystery to this day. I remember catching the headline while scrolling through microfilm of the La Crosse Tribune newspaper looking for something else for a patron. That's often how we find these stories while in pursuit of something else. The victim in the story, Perry L. Brinstad of La Crosse, was described in one article as being an obscure farmer. He died of natural causes at age 70 on September 6, 1932, and was interred in a family plot in Kamel Cemetery on the city's north side the following day. He had no immediate family. The grave robbery was thought to have occurred on September 24th, a Sunday, as witnesses reported seeing a vehicle in the cemetery in the early hours of 2 to 4:30 a.m. To the west of the cemetery were the busy and noisy yards of the Chicago, Burlington, and Quincy Railroad, which also reduced visibility into the cemetery. Kamel Cemetery sits up on a hill, but the Brinstad plot is located on the west side of the cemetery, not far from the road in a flat area. The caretaker suspected some disturbance of his grave 2 days later, and on September 28th, the grave was opened by officials, discovering the empty casket, but not a word went out to the local media, while a short and fruitless investigation followed. The two main motives police detectives postulated were that either the body was stolen for medical experiments, or perhaps the theft was to bilk an insurance company by faking another man's death by arson. The newspaper noted that Brinstad was of a family not known for riches, so the possibility of a ransom attempt was dismissed. In the end, publicity that followed the La Crosse Tribune headline of "Corpse Stolen from Campbell Cemetery Grave" on September 30th alerted the thieves that the officials knew of the offense and likely prompted them to dump the mutilated body in canvas bags on Pettibone Island. Brinstead's remains were reinterred after proper identification, and this case remains unsolved. A simple, homemade cement slab in Campbell Cemetery marks Brinstead's grave. His burial was one of only a handful since the town of Campbell turned the care of the cemetery over to the city of La Crosse just 4 months prior to Brinstead's death. The town of Campbell in the 1860s started this nonsectarian public cemetery as a service to residents of the town. That is how Campbell Cemetery came to be named. Eventually, the land to the west of the cemetery was North La Crosse, and the CB&Q railroad track separated the cemetery from residential areas. Over time, more North La Crosse citizens were buried in the cemetery than town of Campbell residents. It made sense for the town to turn over care of its cemetery to the city of La Crosse in 1932. When you think of the geographic boundaries of the town of Campbell, you likely think of French Island, which is roughly the modern boundary of the town. Up until 1954, when the town of Metairie was formed, the area between Onalaska and North La Crosse was part of the town of Campbell, as well as the land that is now the town of Metairie. As Onalaska grew south and La Crosse grew north, the town of Campbell was squeezed out and Metairie was formed. The dividing line for the split was approximately Oak Street on La Crosse's north side. West of that line continued to be town of Campbell, while east of that line became town of Metairie. The cemetery is located in an industrial area north of La Crosse at the southeast corner of Oak and Palace Streets. It can be a bit of a challenge to reach from La Crosse since 1990 when the Gillette Street overpass was completed. The railroad yard to the west now goes by the name of the BNSF Railway. Fast forward into the early 1990s, we know of the paranormal group mentioned in the story because they came to the La Crosse Public Library archives seeking information on Campbell Cemetery. The archives does have some records of Campbell Cemetery, and amongst the newspaper clipping files is this story of the grave robbery. When members of the group read the story, they were excited to tell the person at the service desk that while conducting sound recordings in the cemetery, they discerned a spirit shouting, "They've cut me up! They've cut me up!" Was this the voice of Perry Brinstead from beyond the grave? Sorry, but the archive staff can't confirm that. Thanks for listening.